What's going on, guys? This episode is sponsored by us here at Elevated Lifestyle Lab. We have fully launched our full line of vitamins and supplements. If you're looking for that little extra energy boost before a workout, looking to put on an extra few pounds of lean muscle, or even boost that immune system, we have everything you're looking for, guys. We have immune boosters, we have daily multivitamins, we have whey protein, we got pre-workout, post-workout, we got collagen repair. So if you're looking for anything in that category, guys, check us out at Elevated Lifestyle Lab. We're offering you guys a 10% discount code for listening to our new podcast episode here of Getting Off the Carousel of Life. So on the checkout screen, under the coupon code, guys, enter GOCL, standing for Getting Off the Carousel of Life. Again, the coupon code is GOCL. That's going to give you 10% site-wide, guys. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time. All right, guys, we are back with another episode of Getting Off the Carousel of Life. We have another great episode for you guys today. Thank you guys for, if you're just tuning in and listening, it's our second episode. I'm really happy. I got my boys Jimmy and Paul here again. How we doing, guys?
Fantastic.
Amazing.
Awesome, guys. Well, we have a great episode today. We kind of sketched all these out prior to actually starting this podcast, so we can kind of keep them in order as far as like what we kind of get out of life and kind of hopefully place it in order where people can kind of pick up and listen from episode to episode and kind of go on this ride with us. So today's episode I'm calling Changing the Input because I feel like this topic is probably like single-handedly the biggest thing that changed my paradigm of thinking and the course of my life. And what I mean by changing the input is books, podcasts, conferences going to, talking to mentors, all that completely changed my way of thinking. And it all kind of started with, with my day job that I had with detailing cars. I just listened to music like 14 hours a day, which is great. I love music. But it got to a point where it's like, okay, like what else should I listen to? Because I keep in mind as that time was going on, I was out of shape. I wasn't eating right. Just a newly father, getting married. And it was just kind of like, you're just your own thoughts of what you're thinking is probably normally not the best. So, I started, that's kind of what broke my podcast cherry and getting into it. And that's when it was when it all began. And funny that I met Jimmy at a Tony Robbins conference. So we kind of knew each other from the gym as far as seeing each other's faces. And then we met each other at the one in Miami here locally. And so just to go show you start putting yourself into these different scenarios, you're going to meet some really cool people from it and have some good experiences. But the topic of changing the input, maybe we can kind of go around and kind of give our own opinion / advice or how we kind of do that. For me, like I had already mentioned, podcast has been single-handedly my biggest changing the input because it really gave me a new way to think about things that I've never thought about, meaning like there's topics that I hear on these podcasts, whether it's self-awareness podcasts, self-development podcasts, endurance training podcasts, even some comedy podcasts. They just bring up these topics that I don't ever talk to anybody about, whether it's just joking around about politics, which I have zero interest in, but it's like these just bringing up different topics that I've never talked about with my friends about it. And then that kind of leads you down the rabbit hole. It's like, oh, that was kind of like a cool idea you had. Then you kind of, ask Google, what's this? And that leads to another one. That leads to another one. And that single-handedly started to change my life with morning routines, waking up early. What can I do before work? How can I clear my mind and start the day fresh? Breath work, meditation, doing steam, get physical activity in the morning, any downtime rather than just listening to my own problems in my head. Like I got to pay this bill. I got to pick the kids up. I got to talk to the wife. I got to do this. Just kind of changing that, like shut up for a minute and I'll put something else on that's I can just digest. And it makes me put into perspective, like, how to think about my problems rather than like just letting shit hit me in the face.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my biggest thing. I credit a lot to, I'm not a big reader, but audiobooks and even online conferences. And like we talked about earlier, like you can find so many things on YouTube. So you just type in, self-awareness or self-development, and it's like millions of different ones. So just kind of going through that was like the thing that just started me really asking questions on like, why do I feel this way? Or how can I change this? Or how can I get healthy? Or what's the right food to eat? And it just sends you down a better direction than trying to do it on your own and not talking to people. So that's kind of like my 2 cents. Mr. Paul, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so all of that definitely was something that I started to ingest, so podcasts, books, and things like that. But really, one of the catalysts before that, so I'll take a step back and kind of share my story a little bit. But long story short is I've been married actually 15 years this December, and I just got into this routine, which I will call the carousel of life, and where I was kind of in my career, comfortable in my career, comfortable in my marriage. I'm a father of two beautiful girls that we've adopted from foster care, and long story short, just I started using alcohol basically to like cope with my stress and things like that. And that just turned out to, on the weekends, like just waiting for the weekends. Oh, thank God it's Friday. Like I'd hang out with my buddies. We'd drink beer and liquor, whatever, just kind of hang out through the weekend and then start the week all over again. It was just like this repetitive cycle. So I would say that like me changing my input was like changing that experience. So the short story on that is we were hanging out with some friends. I had been drinking a lot that day. We were hanging out in the pool with the kiddos, and when I say we were right next door, literally we were one house over, and I had my truck at my buddy's house, and we went to get in the truck, and my wife was like, "Oh, I'll drive," and I'm like, "We're literally right. We're like 50 feet from where it needs to go. Like I know I've been drinking all day, but I can make it 50 feet." Well, that sparked a terrible argument that did not end well for that evening, and I was obviously drunk. I ended up punching a hole basically through my door out of anger, and that sparked my wife the next day to just realize like, hey, we need some serious help here. Like this is a problem. And it wasn't, the issues weren't all on me. It wasn't all my fault necessarily, because she had things that she had to work on, but that event kind of sparked us changing our input. So the input that I would say was that I was inputting just bullshit through my life. So like that weekend partying, like medicating through whatever it is, like alcohol, Netflix, whatever you're checking out with,
food,
yeah, whatever it can be. So
Glee.
Yeah, Jimmy Glee.
so that input just like that keeps you on the carousel of life. You're just on, and you go round and round and round. So after that, Robin, I think she looked for my wife. She looked for like she Googled like marriage podcast, and she found a podcast. And then I had another buddy tell me about a personal development podcast, which was Andy Frisella's podcast, MFCEO Project, and she sent that over to me, and I ended up listening to it. To her surprise, she actually didn't think I was going to listen to it, but so I listened to it, and again, what you were saying was like, I didn't ask the question of like why I was the way I was. So I just kind of was the way I was, and I tried to be better, and I tried to strive for more than what I was, but I didn't know why, and I didn't know how to fix it. So that was the big thing. So once I dove into those podcasts, like from a personal development side with Andy Frisella or Anatomy of Marriage, both podcasts are active today. I highly recommend you guys looking at them. But changing that input and really understanding like why I treated my wife the way I was, why I was drinking the way I was, why I treated my kids the way I was, why my work ethic, like everything, literally my fitness. And, again, I'm not anywhere, like I haven't reached my goals. It's been, I think it's been like 4 years now, 4 or 5 years, but I've gotten better over time. So as long as that trajectory is going in a different direction, like that's the important part.
Sure.
So changing, and I think that's the big thing. Like people are like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to start working out and start being healthy. They feel like they have to change all of these things at once. It's just that little change, like that one, like, hey, don't eat a cheeseburger for dinner tonight. Let's have a salad. You want a burger? Have the burger. Just get it on a salad. Like little changes like that make up a large scale, change over life. So when you need to turn a cruise ship, you're not going to make a hard right, on this cruise ship, because this cruise ship is huge. Like you have to make a degree turn. But if you make that degree turn over a long stretch of distance, like you're going to end up way in a different direction than you started out with. So that was kind of my story in a nutshell, and kind of how I changed that input, or what I was doing on a daily basis that I again would consider that carousel life.
Yeah, for sure. Well said.
So, yeah.
Jimbo?
No, I mean, I was very lucky. 19 years old, being around a company that believed God first, family second, business third. And they said, turn your car into a university. And that's what we did. So, it was, I mean, I think everyone knows when they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like when you're on the right road, I mean, people say, all of a sudden it gets dark, or, they're like, this doesn't feel right. You have to listen to that. And women do a much better job than we do. Yeah. But we have to understand that, like, when that gut tells us, okay, this feels good, this does not feel good, you have to listen to it. Don't give it a whole lot of, validation, but you have to listen to it. So when I started getting around, people that were successful, I mean, I was going to be a GC. I grew up on a job site. I said, you know what, but these guys, hey, they're teaching other people finance. I don't think I would do that long term, but I'm going to go learn what because we have to use money every day. So I'm going to go learn what they're teaching everyone else. A year and a half later, shut down my construction company, went full time. And it was more of that, not knowing that I had that place in my life that needed that void that had to be filled, and it was in that self-improvement, knowing that there's more for me. Not what this person's doing to the left or the right, but me. Like what are my capabilities? What do I hold dear? What's my bar? And I knew that I wasn't getting there. And when I'm looking at these people that are excelling, they're pushing themselves to like another level. I'm like, I need more of that. And so I've since then I read every month podcasts. To go back to what we were talking about podcasts. So when you date someone, you're dating their representative. You don't know them till you get to know them.
Yeah.
And that's what a book is, because that person, they're putting their whole life story into this book, and you're seeing the best side of it. A podcast is you're getting to know them. It's a relationship. So that's where you really get to see the negative, the good stuff, the bad stuff, the little things that they're not so good at. So so I think that mediums like this, platforms like this are amazing, because people get to see the things that are not so accurate, not so perfect, but they get to see the real side of that person who, just like you, we put our pants on the same way, we wake up the same time, we have problems, we have kids, we have all these issues, but we're making a decision that, hey, we're not going to do what everyone else is doing. We're going to get off, see you go around and around, and if we can, try to help you off.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you made a great point with the podcast is a good platform, because it's not just like listening to an audiobook and getting like the story, because I can relate that to so many of the podcasts I've listened to that people have wrote the books, and mostly like, let's just Joe Rogan's podcast with David Goggins. Like Goggins, if you haven't heard of David Goggins, please Google his name and go
Stop
down that
now,
rabbit
pause.
hole. Yeah, and go listen to all his stuff. But
Then
even
come back.
even with him, like people are like, "Oh, I'm reading Goggins' book." And I'm like, I've listened to it. It's really good, but go listen to the 6 hours of podcast he did with Rogan, and I feel like you get more because you're hearing him tell the story. Of course, you're not getting all the details that are in the book, but he's telling the story of the book and what's in it. And
so humans, okay, so we're very different. So some are kinesthetic, some are auditory, some are, I'm a very visual person. So to be able to see the person, talk about it, see their emotion, I mean,
he doesn't have emotion.
I heard that one time when he was 4.
He cried. He made
yeah.
I mean, it's chiseled in stone somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to talk about it. But you do. I mean, we pick up on that, and we were very tribal, beings. So when you see that person go through that quasi-human, David Goggins, you do. You can see the emotion. You can see what he went through as he talks about it.
Sure. Yeah, and I would recommend that to anybody that has not really dove into podcasts before, but have listened to maybe a lot of books. Maybe just Google or search that author on podcasts, because like you said, like you can really feel like, especially if you're really into somebody and you're learning a lot from their books, they've probably got a podcast out there, and you can. That's my thing, and I love it. It's great.
There's people that I don't agree with what they say, and I'll pull them up on YouTube. I look at them, I'm like, he believes or she believes what she's saying. So I have to validate that. Like, we may disagree,
right.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
But when I can look at that person and see what they're saying and how, like, the intensity and just them being genuine, I'm like, you believe that? So, and it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And I like to, that's actually a really good point. So I'm a technologist, own an IT company. When we have social media, Instagram, Facebook, all that bullshit, we have all of this stuff coming at us on a daily basis, and the short story is we have confirmation bias. So we're following a certain subset of people. We're listening to the same thing every day. I actually kind of like chasing after and just understanding, or seeking to understand, I should say, like people that don't necessarily agree with things that I believe in or that I agree with, because you're right, they do fully believe that. So, when I know people, family members and friends, that are like, I have liberal people in my life and conservative people, but I have a lot of conservative people in my life, and they'll sit there and just talk shit about liberals, and I'm like, they believe that. So like, why is everything they're saying false? Like, how can that be that everything that they're saying is false? So we're all on this train ride together. What did you say about the difference between a rut and a grave?
It's the depth.
It's the depth. Like, it's so true. Like, we're all going to the grave. We're all going to die. We're all on this trip together. We're all human beings. And I think that's the biggest thing to take away, because we do, and there are people in my life, like Andy Frisell is huge, and I'll probably continue to talk about him. Like, I get emotional at the fact that I want to meet this guy one day. I just want to shake his hand.
You're going there this summer, man.
I am, yeah, Summer Smash. So I want to meet
I
him.
was not the +1, by the way.
I was waiting on my invite. I'm like, I see the +1 on the picture you sent us. I'm like,
I was happy it was his wife.
It is the wife. So I'm going to meet him. I'm going to meet him one day. I'm just going to shake his hand, and I just want to say thank you. It's that whole like, oh, don't ever meet your heroes and all that stuff. Like, he's a human being, and that's okay. But like, he literally changed my life. And there was that other couple from Anatomy of Marriage podcast, Seth and Melanie Studley. They changed my life. I've met them. I have a relationship with them. I have a friendship with them.
you did a podcast too. Everybody go check it out.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So like, it just there's something to be said about that. But again, back to the confirmation bias. So you have to be careful of like what you're ingesting and what input's coming at you, because you can get that confirmation bias where you're stuck in this rut of just the same thing. And again, that ties back to the carousel. So understanding, or at least seeking to understand somebody else's point of view, where they're coming from, why do they believe the way they believe, what was their upbringing like, the whole racism. So like, I have an African American daughter, and actually my other daughter's biracial. So like, I'm trying to seek to understand, as a white male, like what that background or what that's going to look like in the interactions and things like that. I want to be sensitive to it, but I don't want to enable bad behavior, and I don't want to enable some of the BS that exists around that and what's evolved in our culture today and stuff like that. But I want to seek to understand it, and I think that's the biggest thing, is just like not automatically being defensive and like saying, oh, screw this other person that doesn't agree with me, because I think that's a huge problem in life right now, like huge.
Well, I think what happens is that, so if you allow your identity to be tied to something.
Yes.
So let's say that you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. If your identity is tied to that R or that D, anytime anyone says anything negative about that, they're attacking you.
Yeah.
So what you have to be able to do is say, this is me. This is who I am. This is a thought that I have. This is a belief that I had up to this moment. But hey, convince me. I mean, one of the best compliments I've ever had, we're in a small group hanging out, and a friend of mine, he said, the one thing we talked about with you that we love is that you could be dead set on something. You'll hear input. You will sit there. You'll ingest it. And you will change your mind. I'm like, really? They're like, because I think I'm that way, but you don't know until.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we've talked about it. Like when you're not around, like we love that about you. And that was one of the best compliments I've ever had, because to ever think that you've arrived, that your humility is out the window because you are that smart, really.
Now, let me ask you a question, because I try to instill that in my employees now, that if they have a good idea, please come. I don't want, this isn't the Paul show. This is all of us. Like, we're a team. So does that happen often, where people will come to you with that input and you'll change your mind? And the reason I'm asking that is because I have found myself, and I hope this is not a pride thing, but I've found myself where it doesn't happen often, where people come to me and they go, and it's not necessarily like, oh, they're calling out like an entire process or something like that. They'll say, well, we should do something like this. And I'm like, well, give me, where's the data, or like, what's the reasoning behind it? And I'll absolutely listen, but I'll bring a point and I'm like, well, what about this? And they're like, well, I didn't think about that. So how often, so my question again is, how often do you change your mind? Does it happen often or not as often?
So it's not about changing your mind.
Okay.
So the only way that I can influence someone is if they influence me or have the ability to influence me.
Yeah.
So when, let's say that I am dead set that I think I'm right.
Yeah.
I have enough understanding, once again, self-awareness, that I'll say, let's try it your way. I think we should do this, but hey, let's do it together. Let's work it out. Let's see what happens. There's been a few times where halfway through, the person's like, I think your way. I'm like, I wasn't but you have to be genuine. You can't just, it's not lip service.
Yes.
Because once again, like the podcast thing, I mean, so you being a foster parent, I'm a foster parent. One of the things that really just stuck with me. The first class that we took, they said, when you're dealing with not dealing, but you're having a conversation or a relationship with a child that's gone through foster care, don't lie to them. Like
Yeah.
their sensory acuity, they can pick up on body language more than most adults. So if you're mad, say you're mad. If you're happy, say you're happy. Don't be like, yeah, everything's good. So we all have that ability, whether or not we listen or not. So to answer your question, I would say half the time, I may just say that's a better idea, and we just go with it.
Yeah.
The other half, I may work with them, and then out of that half, a quarter of the time we'll do what I initially said we should do, and the other quarter of the time we'll make an adjustment that's kind of in the middle.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to ever, and I think that I'm aware enough. I don't want to ever get to a point, and I say that because there are many people in my life where I look at them and they think they have arrived, and I'm like, this is not, the situation that's going on right now is not good.
Yeah. My son literally said last week, he goes, Dad, you said we're human becomings, right?
Yeah.
So that's when you know.
Yeah.
Like when your kids are regurgitating things like that, I'm like, okay, obviously I'm saying it enough
Yeah.
that my 10-year-old, he's like, well, we're not human beings. Like, we're human becomings. I'm like,
I love that. No, that's great.
Yeah,
and I
listening.
don't ever want to get to that point where I think I know better. Like I've arrived. Like I'm not. I don't ever want to get to that point ever. Like I actually like learning from other people's mistakes or getting input. I do enjoy that because I don't want to make bad decisions and hurt myself or hurt my family or my business or things like that.
well, you said, like before we started, you said that ignorance is a bad word. I think perfection is worse than the word ignorance. Now we've taken this word ignorance and we've made it. I've literally looked at, as a partner in my company, I've looked at a guy a year in. I said, I don't know what that is. I'm ignorant to that. He goes, well, you're not ignorant. I said, I didn't say I was ignorant. I'm ignorant to this.
Yes.
Can you please explain it to me?
Yeah.
It's not a negative thing. I'm letting you know.
Words matter.
Yeah. I'm letting you know this is an unknown. Will you help me make it a known?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important. Like you're saying, sometimes you're like, most of the time you're right. But I think, and you're saying you enjoy learning from other people's experiences.
Yeah.
I kind of incorporate all that. If somebody comes to me with something that I've been doing for a long time, I find it beneficial to make, like you're saying, Jimmy, is to almost welcome it in. Like, let's give it a try. Let's fail together. And although you probably thought you were right the whole time, like now you can share that experience with it, because most likely if that person's coming to you with this idea, there's probably other people maybe in the office or maybe the friends that might be thinking the same thing. So it can almost work in your benefit by, if it's not like a big deal, like, oh, let's change this whole company. No, like if it's, small things to maybe entertain that idea. If you think like, well, I don't know if it could, but just to almost show to show them like it's not going to work. Like you start doing it like you say, and the people are like, I think you were right.
But sometimes
that can help a lot.
But sometimes, so one of the guys on my team, so he had an amazing idea. I stood up, but we're entrepreneurs. Like if you have a good idea, we're acting now.
Yeah.
I stood up, walked over to my office manager. I said, okay, so and so said this. That's what we're doing here. He goes, you sure? I'm like, yeah. So in front of everyone, he saw his idea was better than mine, and I walked over to office manager and we made a change. So, but
That's huge for him.
But it's once again, I mean, it's I'm not doing it for show. I wasn't acting. It's like I'm sitting there, I'm listening to an idea and understanding, you know what, I came up from a place where, like, when you get together 4 or 5 people, the idea that will come out of that is better than any one of those humans that could have came to just on their own.
Yeah.
So we're going to come together. I don't know what it's going to look like at the end, but it's going to be better than any one of us could have done on our own.
Yeah.
And if you go through that and you enter it with that type of mindset, the end product will be better.
Yeah.
The human experience is very collaborative. Like if you think you're a special snowflake that can solve the world's problem, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
It's not- and that's okay. So that's my issue with Instagram. Okay? Because, no. Because for me, I'm like, I'm not that important. I'm not
Yeah.
that special.
Yeah.
And I look at some people that think they are. I'm like, you're just not.
It's
Yeah.
I mean,
flooded with
like
that.
Prince, like when he passed, a week later, just like we had this brief moment here.
Yeah.
So make it work, impact people, say what you mean, take care of your family, take care of your community, and then you're gone.
yeah. It happens quick.
Yeah, it happens so quick.
Yeah.
Well, last little thing I want to touch on before this topic of changing the input, which we talked about podcasts, books, audiobooks, conferences, mentors, podcast setting like this. I think one thing that we might not have mentioned on, which I've had some experience with, and I'm sure you guys have too, is changing the input with the people closest to you.
Yes.
Like, I know we're talking about in business and disagreeing and something like that, but
Yeah.
just changing the input of people that aren't thinking the way you do, or negatively tell you that you can't do it, whether it's, oh, I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. and go for a run, and people are like, you're fucking crazy, why are
Yeah.
you doing that? And so that happened to me a lot when I started waking up at 3 a.m. and doing this, and I still get that, like, what are you doing? But it's like, if it's the people closest to you that are questioning you, telling that you shouldn't do that it's not the right thing to do, that's like another section where it's like you really have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could be a hard situation if it's your closest ones. But also that might be a sign that you gotta get off that carousel of that and maybe have a serious talk with that person. But I think it's really important to know that when you're getting that input, because I've seen so many times of people doing, like, friends like, oh, I'm gonna do this weight loss challenge, or I'm gonna change my diet, and then their better half is like eating nachos right in front of them, or like it's just like little things that just might not be the best input for you when you're trying to change your life, So I think that's another area.
There's two ways to have the largest building in town, right? You either build it or you tear the other one down.
Yeah.
And if you feel that someone's trying to tear you down to their level because you're trying to go too big, I mean, some people have to be left at the dock.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
But there are people that you have to have some separation.
Yeah.
My friends have changed or evolved, we'll say,
Yeah.
over the last few years.
Now you can. Now some people want to get on the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And, they see you growing, and they see a part of them that they want to have more of.
Yep.
And you can be that guidance. You can be that that inspiration.
Yeah.
Now here's the flip side of that. Don't make yourself an island. So I had actually had a good buddy a long time ago. He basically told me at one point, he's like, oh, the only opinion that matters is my wife. And now I agree to a certain extent that your wife's, but basically what the problem was there was a situation that we're talking about, and like he was getting input from a lot of other people, and his wife basically disagreed with everybody else. So like he basically made himself an island where you're isolating yourself from a bunch of feedback. So like I think that's the flip side of like your friends talking negatively. If there's a lot of people trying to speak into your life, which I know a couple people that there's a group of people trying to speak into that person's life specifically, and they're not listening to anybody at all. So it's like this weird dichotomy of that.
But don't we know, like, someone saying run in the road,
Yeah.
someone saying cars come and get out.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
we know.
Yeah.
We know. Yeah. So when that person, when they're saying, please get out of the road, I care for you, we know.
Yeah.
So we just got to stay away from the people who say, I think you're good.
Yeah. Yeah, with a semi truck coming down the road. Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, I think we covered the changing the input topic really well today. Again, I appreciate you guys coming on and sharing your experience with us.
Absolutely.
What I am going to do is what I did notice, Paul, you were mentioning some of the podcasts that help us out and some of the audio books. I'm going to put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really name off any, but I think that can help with a lot of people. Jimmy, I'll get a few from
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So in the YouTube notes, guys, check it out. We'll put a few of the key podcasts that's kind of changed our input, any audio books or anything that we could point you to hopefully better you guys at doing that. Again, if you haven't liked or shared the podcast, please subscribe now. Share with all your friends.
Hit the like button.
Hit that like button. Send us any messages if you want any topics covered. We'll be happy to talk about it. Appreciate you guys. Thank you, Paul and Jimmy, for coming out, and we'll see you next time.